All right, thank you for staying with us. The Attorney General of the Federation and Minister of Justice, Abubakar Malami, has written a letter to the Supreme Court asking it to dismiss a suit filed by 3 state governments challenging the Naira redesign policy of the Central Bank of Nigeria. In a preliminary objection filed by the AGF, the federal government argued that the Supreme Court lacks jurisdiction to entertain the suit. With reference to Section 251 of the Constitution, Mr. Malami argues that the suit falls within the exclusive jurisdiction of the Federal High Court in matters of monetary policy of an agency of the federal government. The governors of Kaduna, Kogi, and Zamfara states earlier sued the federal government over the Naira redesign policy of the CBN that has brought untold hardship on Nigerians and sparked pockets of protest in different parts of the country. Well, joining us now is lawyer and public affairs analyst Jide Ologun. Good morning. Thank you for joining us on TVC Breakfast.
Good morning. It's my pleasure.
And just this morning, we're seeing in the papers that the Attorney General has come out to say that they will abide by that order, though they are still looking to challenge that suit within the confines of the law. So help us understand all of these matters. In the first place, do you agree with the initial objection of the Attorney General to say that the Supreme Court lacks jurisdiction to addressing the matter? Help us better understand all of this that is happening.
Great. You know, the Supreme Court is the first and last instance between the state and the federation. And of course, when you talk about CBN, it should have gone through the Federal High Court, like the plenary objection is trying to point out. But this time around, the 3 states, they've gone after the federation on a policy. And that is what we call vicarious responsibility. And so not directly targeted at CBN as an institution, but at a policy that the implementation is throwing the state into crisis. Because if you read the argument of the governor of Kaduna State, for instance, there is food shortage, people are protesting. It has brought hardship. So, and the argument now is that CBN is not a party to this suit.
Yes.
So CBN should not be affected. And I appreciate the fact that the Attorney General of the Federation has now come to the point, and in his own position, of giving the rule of law its right of place. Because the Supreme Court is there as one of the 3 arms representing judiciary. We have 3 arms of government, the executive, the legislative, and the judiciary. So now, are you going to throw the nation into chaos because of the technicalities of the law? And let's also clarify this. The order given by the 7-man panel is an interim order. And what is an interim order? There is a matter between the Supreme Court for interpretation. In the meantime, so that you don't frustrate the efforts of the court, maintain this position. Don't implement on the 10th of February. We are going to hear you on the 15th.
Right.
So when you come on the 15th, we look at the substance of your position. So if on the 15th of February, the Supreme Court feels we don't have jurisdiction, let them declare. But right now, let us help the society in the midst of the crisis that have been created. And do you know one thing? Even the deputy governor of the central bank already came out to admit that they did not, evaluate the ecosystem of this policy's implementation. And we now have crisis. IMF has warned us. Even the National Security Advisor, Monguno, has warned us. And when you test a project and you discover failure, the failure doesn't come midway. It comes ab initio, at the point of conception. And I'm glad many Nigerians were advising when this policy was conceived that you need to look at the implementation. And as we progress, I will bring some references across the world where they have also changed their...
You can go ahead.
Now, let's look at India. In 2016, India decided to withdraw the 500 and 1,000 rupees for the same reason of going after black marketers, tax evaders, and trying to, introduce a cashless economy. But it failed woefully because you have about 190 million Indians that are not having access to this cashless policy we are talking about. It failed woefully. And look at the United Kingdom. Recently, after the demise of the Queen, there is a change in the configuration of the currency. But it will not be fully introduced into the mainstream until the middle of 2024. And in public relations, when you talk about change management, there are 4 aspects of it. You have the shock of introducing that change. You have the anger that follows. You have the acceptance. You have the commitment. And if you look at Frank Jeffkins' transfer process, you talk about happy SEAC in code, which means you expect hostility. You expect, apathy. You expect prejudice. And you expect ignorance when you are going to implement a policy. And you transfer hostility to sympathy. You transfer apathy to interest. You transfer prejudice to acceptance. And you transfer ignorance to knowledge. So which have we done? We have the federal... Sir?
Nothing.
Okay, now, the INEC chairman has assured us, in fact, he has revealed to us that Central Bank is the banker of INEC, so there shouldn't be a problem. NNPC will make fuel available. And people were saying, when there was an uproar, legitimately so, that there may be a cabal somewhere trying to disrupt the forthcoming election. And this is being justified now, because you talk about perception in public relations.
Right.
It was a good policy. But how do you implement it? Particularly when you don't have the infrastructural backup. And some of us said it. Even within Lagos, how many persons have access to internet banking? In fact, as a lawyer, one of the major problems we have is when people transfer money, it does not go, and some banks are asking for a court order. How much is the money that you want to go and retrieve from another account that you are paying for court order? Is it cheap to go to court? So these are issues, and we expected that the stakeholders should have sat down to evaluate the value chain of this policy to avoid this embarrassment. And a wise man said that it's better to measure 10 times and cut once than to measure once and cut 10 times. I think we measured once and we are cutting 10 times. And I pray, and that's what the Supreme Court is trying to do now. When the NSAS protest landed, it took the interventions of the guns to quell it. If this cash lockdown, or whatever you want to call it, starts its own trouble, how are we going to manage it? And again, let's talk about the environment. We have brought a change that is linked up with an existing harsh change of fuel increase, involuntary fuel increase, pump price, scarcity, scarcity of electricity, even when what we pay has been increased to the back door. So you find a nation where 133 million citizens are admitted by the government of being within the multifaceted poverty. Yeah. So what do you expect? You see, and my constitution, the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, if you look at section 14, subsection 2 of the 1999 Constitution as amended, it says that the security and the welfare of the citizens shall be the primary purpose of government. So where do you throw security here? Where do you throw the welfare of the people? So, and I have also read that somebody could have lied to the president. That is a leadership issue. In consultancy, you make recommendations to your client. You cannot force a client to implement it. You see,
wait, is there an error in let's go back to the technicality. Is there not an error in the Malami's suit in saying that this thing is about the CBN and therefore it should go through the High Court? The technicality itself this is not an act of ignorance, because the case is not just against the CBN. It is for the poor. It is for the man who cannot buy gari. It's for the woman who cannot sell kose. It's for the person who cannot move from one place to the other because they don't have enough money. Just like the intervention of the Lagos State governor. Now say, okay, cut the thing from. So it is not about CBN. It's about human rights. So I think the Attorney General seems not to understand the law. I think the Attorney General and the CBN governor, they fall into the same bracket of thinking that law is for law's sake and economics is for economics' sake. But all these things are for society. Society is the reason for the law and not law for society. Yeah. Society, according to the economist Carl Polanyi, and who wrote the great book, The Great Transformation, and Abraham Rustin was my teacher at University of Toronto, is that the economy is not about economics. It's about society. I think we read in economics in those days, Hansen. He said, economy is man in his ordinary business of life, which is how you eat, how you talk to your father, how you talk to your wife, how you give birth, how you move from one place to the other, how you do parties, how you crown your king. They're all within the purview of economics. I think that I want you to go into that issue as to the fact that is Malami ignorant of the society at large? They're just thinking about the law.
You know, he should not be ignorant if the concept of leadership is understood. You know, and you know, when lawyers argue over these issues, you can argue from all sides, and I've taken the pain to explain. Fine, this matter is not against central bank, but against a policy that involves central bank, that is likely to throw the nation into anarchy. And that is why central bank is not joined as a direct party. And recall that before extending the date of making these currencies legal tender from 31st of January to the 10th of February, which was, it should be today, the CBN governor went to Daura to receive directive from the president.
Exactly.
Does that not contravene the independence of CBN under the Constitution? So if you have gone to a master to receive instruction, then the law can go after your master to say, tell your servants that this nation may go on fire.
Yes.
You see, so those who went to court also are smart about it. If we argue over this, you see, when you talk about the law stricto sensu, it's there, but there is equity. And what is the role of equity? The mandate of equity is to prevent miscarriage of justice. And I believe that is what the Attorney General has looked at, because the option is that we are not going to respect the decision of the Supreme Court. And I was waiting to see how CBN and the president, particularly when the president is exiting office now, but he has even set up a committee for that purpose. And he should leave with accolades. He should leave celebrated. That is my desire for him. And that is why he should sit up now. If it is true that somebody is misleading the president, it's an aberration on my nation. It shouldn't be. Leadership has a higher demand. You know, various persons will come around you to give instructions. So I don't think that, you know, my senior Silk is ignorant of the position of the law. And there's this saying, and I say it with due respect.
That means it's tendentious. It's deliberate. It's deliberate. It's deliberate contrarianism.
You know, I think what I'm about to say, we anchor that, really.
Okay.
And permit me to say this with all due respect, that he who pays the piper dictates the tune. So when you hear somebody coming out to say that Nigeria is safer now in 2023 than it was in 2015, it may not be a statement he would have made if left alone without an office
Who is the
occupy.
piper? I know he's dictating.
I leave that to you.
No, you said it.
So and that is why, sincerely, we need to develop our system to the point where you are not afraid of leaving office. Let's say it as it is. And that's why I respect the UK. You saw prime ministers just stepping aside. In fact, somebody came in, a very brilliant opportunity, and evaluated the task and said, no, I cannot cope with this.
Yeah.
And she stepped aside. That's a good system.
That's the Prime Minister of New Zealand.
Even UK, before Sunak came in. You see, so that is leadership.
No, Liz Truss's own case was that she was overwhelmed.
That's what I'm
saying.
There
were crises and she could not handle.
Exactly.
Liz Truss, she buckled.
Exactly.
In the case of is it Australian woman, and she said,
New Zealand,
sorry, the New Zealand woman, she said, well, I have nothing left in the tank, quote and unquote. Our own people are tanking us.
And you see, in testing this policy, a policy that has exposed the commercial banks to attacks from citizens, it's not, even if we have to go to the extreme, I may sue the federal government. Why should I have millions of naira in the bank? I mean, I'm still trying to study the law. I don't think there is a law that says the bank can prevent me
from accessing
Is
my
that not human rights?
Exactly.
It's a human right.
So if we start this battle,
it's right to eat.
It can,
right to pay my rent. Right to pay my airfare.
You need to have seen what people have gone through. It's if people go into the ATM machines to queue as early as 4 a.m., fuel stations. In fact, the deputy governor of CBN rightly appreciated. She even said they did not envisage the new lines of business that would have been created by the crisis. People going to queue to collect money on behalf of those desperate to collect.
Some of us said it. I said it on this show that this day was going to come. I said it. I said this day was going to come. We had, just 2 months ago, or a few months ago, we had floods everywhere. Lokoja was submerged. 22 states were dislocated. What did you think will happen to banks in those places? What would you think to the movement of people around? Who said it that this thing was going to cause? That's aside from the fact that half of the Nigerian population, no access to banks. In Borno State, for instance, only 2 local governments have banks. The governor of Nasarawa was here 2 days ago, and he said one of the big local governments he visited the day before had no bank there. He didn't only say that, he said to even host the president. He went to the CBN governor and asked for 5 million naira. And CBN did not even give them 5 million to even host the president who sanctioned this policy. He didn't have a kobo to do that.
And now, sir, CBN is saying, I mean, from the report I read, that about 20 million naira is released to each branch on a daily basis. And some banks are not even opening. I've been to some branches where the branch manager will tell me, Mr. Ologun, we don't have the money. Fine. The bank has identified some commercial banks holding the money. By the grace of God, at the age of 23, I was in the legal unit of the Central Bank of Nigeria. And we work closely with the bank examination department and the banking supervision. So is CBN now saying you have a policy to implement and you cannot monitor the value chain? Do we need to go and hire a Tompolo?
That's the question. Is it that they cannot sanction these banks?
So is it the citizens now that should now help you to ensure compliance with regulations?
So is it that the CBN cannot identify these banks and do the needful?
These are big questions, and that is a systemic issue.
It's not a guilt problem. Crisis. As CBN come to say, UBA will give you so amount, GTB will give you this amount, Zenith will give you this amount, First Bank will give you this amount.
Where is it?
Let them publish it so that we hold the CEOs responsible. The CEOs have been quiet. They've not been talking. because they don't want to get into the hot soup of the CBN that may become revanchist and go after them and say, okay, you know they did, you know that Sanusi did to them.
Eventually, sir, we are gravitating towards that. You know, many were shocked when some justices of the Supreme Court rose up with protest
against
the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court.
Yes.
I think we are beginning to build up to that. Unless, you see, public relations, according to 1978 Mexican statement, is the art and social science of monitoring trends, predicting their consequences, and advising clients on what to do to ensure mutual understanding and still stabilize your business. After this crisis, the bank may run into a deeper crisis of people pulling out their funds
and saying
to buy
I don't trust
piggy
them
banks
anymore
and keep their money.
Trust issues.
That is so. You need to look at all this.
Counterproductive to the essential purpose. Exactly. And I precisely said that too. That time, I said people will now distrust the bank. All they want to do is that, okay, you want new notes. Okay, I collect my new notes, I'm not bringing it back.
And I liken it to how we manage the state of insecurity. At the time, an Inspector General of Police came out announcing that people should come and surrender their guns. And the bandits are heavily equipped with guns.
Yes.
So some citizens said, what are you telling me? You appear not to be able to defend me, and you are asking me to bring my guns. It doesn't work.
It doesn't work.
There has to be, and we are not talking about infrastructure. Before you implement, put the infrastructure there. If we are in a society that is truly cashless, it's a good system. Cashless policy. You don't just adopt something that works somewhere and then begin to throw your citizens into unnecessary hardship. And I believe that on the strength of our argument, the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, the President of Nigeria, we keep consulting with stakeholders on how to open the business space.
He's going to be at the Council of State meeting, which they will be holding today. Recall the President has said we should give him 7 days. And the CBN governor will be there to brief him as well with this recent development, I'm certain. What are the outcomes you foresee at the end of the day with regards to this meeting? Also placing it side by side the fact that the Attorney General has said that they will obey the Supreme Court, but then again, they are still going to challenge that within the confines of the law. How will things pan out?
And interestingly, where do you challenge it? Before the same Supreme Court. You see, so I think there is a concept we gave birth to in Nigeria at a time, the doctrine of necessity. So beyond the legalities, look out of the window and let the president know a man went naked in a banking hall.
Someone actually
because
collapsed.
He could not access his money. That
what of somebody, a person who was in the hospital and she couldn't get the full amount of money, and the people said, if you don't get your full amount of money, you're not getting the treatment. That is rights to life. So the Malami should understand that this is not just about powers of the CBN. It's about, it thinks it's up there. He has forgotten what is going on with the masses.
Right. Exactly. And, you know, above all, my wish for my president, whom I respect so much, and the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, is that he leaves office celebrated. That's my wish.
Yes.
And it's up to him.
Yes.
You see, because Section 14 of the Nigerian Constitution 1999 as amended says sovereignty belongs to the people. You see, Aso Villa, like I say, is like a tenancy apartment. You see, you go in there, you occupy, you manage the resource of the country to create commonwealth for common good or otherwise.
People are the landlord.
You know, so it's a clear, so if and except we are now trying to justify the claims of the First Lady that some cabal came to hijack the governance process. And if that is the report, it's still an issue of leadership.
She was the first person to talk about the cabal, even before before
I knew you would like to
the kids got on. He was the first person. He said the people who are now here, they're not there when we're cooking this soup. Where are they now? Where are they at the dinner table?
In fact, at a time...
When we're cooking this soup, when we're looking for the ogbono, when we're looking for the pepper, when we're looking for the firewood, we didn't see these people. Now the soup done, we put it on the table, and they are the ones taking the golden plate.
Exactly.
Why?
In fact, at a
they
time...
have the largest share of the amala. And then they're taking the better part of the chicken and the soup. And now all of their... There was one story of somebody who was in a church event and they were serving food. He was dressed like me with tie, shirt and everything. And they were trying to serve me food. I said, no, man, give me that shit. That means the tie can't enter the soup. They say, your tie don't enter soup, and he stood up again, and then the tie came back and stained the whole shirt.
You see, and...
These are the kind of things.
And again, it should be noted that it's very important that the essence of being in office is to improve the circumstances of the nation. And recall that at the time, even the First Lady, we should be enjoying the paraphernalia of office, jetted out of Nigeria, just to get to have a sense of security. So these are issues. And, as we round up, 8 years are gone now, and it's all about leadership. I've said it over and over. Many people may not remember the Minister of Finance in 20 years' time, but they will remember that President Muhammadu Buhari
when I saw people
we need to wrap up
is
now.
the president.
We need to wrap up now for want of time, but we must thank you, lawyer and political affairs analyst Jide Ologun, for your time on the program.
God bless Nigeria.
Amen.
Amen.
Come out to vote on the 25th.